Hey there, Fletch from All Things Overlanding here. On today's episode, I actually have a request from a viewer who asked, what are you moving over from the Xterra to the Frontier? A really quick recap if you're not familiar with this, or this is your first video you've watched on my channel. For the last 5 years, I had an '05 Nissan Xterra that I overlanded, built all up, built my own drawer system, did a bunch of cool modifications to it, and really loved that truck. Hit a point where it had needed a lot of work to be done to it to fix up all the suspension and stuff. And I simultaneously had an opportunity to trade that vehicle for a built up, Titan swapped, lifted, armored up Frontier. So I took that opportunity and I swapped them. But in doing so, obviously, I had a ton of stuff that I already bought or built for the Xterra that then I lost or I needed to move over to the Frontier. So that was kind of the nice thing is in the trade, the guy just wanted the stock vehicle. He didn't want all the stuff that was on it. So I was able to take out my AGM battery, my solar panel came off. The majority of my stuff, my rooftop tent, all my radio stuff, GMRS, my WeBoost, all that stuff came out. So now I've been kind of thinking about it. I've been thinking about my build for the Frontier and what I'm going to change about it, what I'm going to do to it. And again, then a user, M. Jenner is his username. I'll flash up his quote here on the screen. But he said, hey, it'd be really cool to hear what are you going to take from the Xterra and move over to the Frontier, and what are you not going to take, and why are you not going to take those things, or why wouldn't you be able to take those things? So again, today's episode, my focus is going to be a little bit on, the interchangeability between an Xterra and a Frontier, because a lot of stuff swaps. And then also just kind of talking about my experience, what I have built into my Xterra that I'm now going to move over to the Frontier. Again, this will be sort of a Nissan sort of specific episode, but I mean, these things can apply to any vehicle, right? Because a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about moving are aftermarket things like solar panels, fridges, modifications that I've made to the vehicle or things that I've added to the vehicle that I'm going to swap over. So this should apply to pretty much everybody, but if you're a Nissan person, this will give you some bonus points, right? So without further ado, let's dive into that and talking about what's moving from the Xterra to the Frontier in the swap. All Things Overlanding is brought to you by Red Arc, Power Management Solutions, Rugged Bound Supply Company, rooftop tents, awnings, roof racks, and more. Overland Addict, premium overland gear. Last US Bag, overlanding bags and equipment. Northology Overland, trips and a monthly overlanding magazine. All of these companies are really amazing, so I highly recommend you click through the links in the description below to learn more about each of them. Okay, so let's start with what I am going to move over from the old truck. So if you remember, if you're familiar with my builds, the Xterra had a hood-mounted Renogy 100-watt solar panel. That fed initially a small battery in the back of the truck on my home-built drawer system that I had back there. And then eventually I ended up swapping that over to, once I got an Odyssey deep cycle starter battery, I ended up swapping the solar over to that just to constantly keep that topped off. And it was a great setup. It was fantastic. So on the new truck, the new Frontier, I've swapped over the AGM battery. I moved that. I pulled all the solar stuff off the old truck. Again, it was mounted on my hood on the old truck. On the new truck, it has a cab rack built into it that has nothing stored on top of it. So my plan is to take the solar panel, put it up on the roof. I'm thinking about engineering some sort of a solution to use gas struts so that I can adjust it up and down and change the direction that the solar panel faces based on the direction of the sun. But it may also just make sense to just flat mount it and make it fixed. So I don't want to over-engineer it, but that's kind of a thought that I had is I may come up with some sort of a solution where I could, make it turn towards the sun somehow. But I'm going to think about that. But either way, it's moving over to the new truck, just maybe in a different location. One thing that is pretty cool, again, the Frontier and the Xterra are very, very similar. They actually take the same headlights. So on my old truck, I had these aux beam LED with a fan in them headlights, and they were great. I've had them for about 3 years. They still work like a charm. I may not actually swap those over because it's almost more work than it's worth, but I'm probably just going to buy those exact same bulbs again and put them in the housings in the Frontier. So the headlights will swap over, and it's a great upgrade. I'm really super happy with the lights. So I'm going to either buy a new set of those or transfer those over as well. Of course, I'll throw some stuff up here so you can see it. The rooftop tent that I've got is a Big Country 4x4 from Rugged Bound Supply Company. Fantastic hard shell tent, super well made. I love that tent. So of course I had to take that, right? It was on the Xterra on my DIY Unistrut roof rack. And actually, because of the DIY unistrut roof rack, it made moving everything really, really easy. So what I did was I unhooked all my cords for my GMRS mounts to that, my GMRS antenna, and my WeBoost antenna mount to that DIY unistrut roof rack, and then my awning mounts to that too. So I was able to just unhook the radio cables basically and move the whole thing as one entire unit from the Xterra over to the Frontier. So rooftop tent, awning, GMRS, the Midland MX275, which is a fantastic built-in hardwired unit. That's moving over. And then my WeBoost, which I love too. It's a little bit pricey, but man, if you really need internet out in the middle of nowhere and you got a little bit of signal, but you need to boost it, the WeBoost is a great option too. So that is moving over as well. So again, I'm trying to make as much use as possible. I've already bought all this stuff. I've already spent a good amount of money on this stuff, despite switching to a new rig, especially because of the similarities between a Frontier and an Xterra. I want to lose as little as possible. I already kind of figured out my setup. I just want to move it over, right? So that's the plan. My fridge, my Alpacool fridge, I've had it for a little over a year now. It's been fantastic. I love it. I'm going to move that over too. One thing that I have to figure out is because in the back of the Frontier, I have a decked system. That combined with the rack that goes over the bed, there's not quite enough room for the fridge in the back. And I also worry about it in like a weather situation. I'm not 100% sure that it's weatherproofed and ready to go for, being outdoors basically. So what my temporary solution is it's going to go in the back seat of the truck and I'm just going to lash it down. So that is moving over and I'm going to keep using it. At some point that may go up for sale and I may have to buy a lower lid or smaller unit to fit in the back of the truck. And I also would probably want something that's kind of weatherized, one of those maybe with the lockable latches that you can, sort of lock down. Maybe something like a Winner or a Snowmaster or something like that. But for now, the fridge is moving over. I'm just going to keep using it. My propane tank, I did recently upgrade to a 5-pound propane tank. It was a great modification. Much smaller and lighter than a 20-pound, but much bigger than a 1-pound. I've probably been using that same tank for 6 to 8 months now. Probably used it a dozen times, and I think I still have like a third of a tank, a half of a tank, somewhere in that ballpark. So it's just great. It's still small enough. I'm just going to, I plan to mount it to my rack, my bed rack in the back, over on the side probably, or in the very back. And then that will give me access to it with my long cord that I've got for it to run it to my stove. That's another thing. The stove, for now, I'm going to keep my Coleman stove. I'm going to move it into my decked system in the bed of the truck, but it's really big. It does fit in the decked system. I've already put it in there, but it takes up a lot of room. So I've watched a lot of videos. I watched Venture to Roam's review recently of the Jetboil Genesis, and it's $300 for a stove, which is a lot, and it hurts my budget-minded soul. But everybody says such good things about it. It's so well built. It's so easy to clean. It has such great temperature control, and that's the one thing that is sort of lacking on the Coleman is it's kind of almost an on-off switch, just not that accurate, and it's kind of hard to cook on. Plus, it's smaller because it folds in half, so it folds down into a smaller footprint. That's in the back of my mind. I'm moving the Coleman for now, the Coleman 2-burner stove, but I may be upgrading or swapping to something like a Jetboil Genesis here before too long. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to learn more about that stove if you haven't really heard of it. Again, Venture to Roam did a great review of it, goes through all the features and everything really quickly, really nice, concise review, so definitely check that out as well. My high lift I'm going to keep. I had that previously basically strapped to the back of my front passenger seat just to get it out of the way and get it in from the weather. The truck that I bought does have high lift mounts in the inside of the bed, so I'm going to mount that just right inside the rack inside of the bed. So that will move back to the outside now, but it'll be inside the bed. And then, of course, my last US bags, trash bag. I love that thing. Previously, I was mounting it to my hatch on the Xterra, which the straps are long enough to do that, but it's not ideal, right? Like you got to be careful that you don't bust buckles when you close the back hatch. It's just not perfect, right? It's not ideal. But on the new truck, I've got a big rear swing out with a 35 on it. It'll be perfect for mounting that bag too. So I'm going to mount that to the rear tire, and that's my plan for that. So I'm really excited about that. But so that's the bulk of the things that I'm going to be moving over from the Xterra. So really, I got 85-90% of the stuff that I had on the Xterra, that I bought for the Xterra, that I built into the Xterra, is going to move over to the Frontier. From a suspension standpoint, the Frontier is already super modified. It's lifted 2.5 inches. If you're a Nissan person, Radflow's in the front, Old Man Emu, Leaf's in the rear. So it's got about 2.5 inches of lift, and then it's Titan swapped. So it has the underpinnings from a full-size Nissan Titan underneath of it, beefier brakes, beefier brake lines, beefier hubs, spindles, upper control arms, lower control arms. It has SPC upper control arms, so it's really well built. The suspension and everything is fantastic. It's from a shop that builds armor and bumpers and stuff, so it's bumpered up, it's armored up all the way underneath the bottom, so it's totally protected already. It's a really super strong build. So I'm really excited to get out and test all that stuff once I get everything switched over. So as far as things that I'm not moving over, that I can't transfer over, in my case, my Xterra was stock. I had 2-inch wheel spacers on it, so it looked like it was Titan swapped. I got a lot of questions about whether it was Titan swapped because of how aggressive it looked, but they were just wheel spacers. So I was still on all stock Xterra stuff. So as far as the suspension goes, again, the new truck is already built anyway, so I don't really have to worry about it. But even if I did want to swap the stuff, it's not really compatible anymore because now it's Titan swapped. So even the lug pattern on the wheels is different. It matches a Titan instead of a Frontier or an Xterra. So I can't swap over my wheels and tires, unfortunately. I can't swap over my suspension, any of that stuff, but that's okay. Again, I traded the truck with those items in exchange for this truck, basically. So it kind of all worked out. It still got value, but I can't swap those things over. And then probably the biggest sort of hit that I'm taking in this trade is the drawer system. I love the drawer system. It was a really well built, hand built by a buddy of mine. It was beautiful, a good looking drawer system, and it was built to my spec, right? Like I said, I want a fridge and a stove, and I want to be able to mount my chainsaw on the side and do all this, right? I had all these ideas, and he basically designed it and built it to my spec, which was awesome. So now not having that closed back of the Xterra, obviously I'm going to have the open back of the truck, so I've got a decked system, which is just a couple of drawers that are built into the bed of the truck basically now. But I can't obviously use that drawer system, so that's a little bit sad that I can't take that over. But from my understanding, it's gone to a good home. The guy that I traded the truck to actually donated it to another Xterra guy, which is really cool. So yeah, unfortunately can't bring those things over, but it's okay. It went to a good home, and I know that he'll make good use of it. So to kind of wrap this up, I just wanted to kind of give you my final thoughts on, again, what I was able to move over and what I wasn't able to move over and what swaps between the Frontiers and the Xterras. Again, everything pretty much swaps. Almost everything swaps between the Xterra and Frontier, from, headlight bulbs to suspension, brakes, wheels and tires. Like pretty much everything is interchangeable on these two trucks. There are some things that aren't. Don't take me literally here and say, oh, he said everything was. I'm going to buy Frontier taillights and slap them on my Xterra. That's not how it works, right? But there are a huge number of things that will swap between these. Engine, transmission, all that stuff will kind of swap in and out of these trucks. So they are really amazing the way that they're built so similarly, and the fact that you can swap things on and off. So again, I'm going to swap as much stuff over from my old build as possible. It just makes more sense from a financial standpoint. Again, I had to kind of dial in a lot of my gear. I don't want to start from scratch and have to rebuild the whole thing, from scratch because I swapped to a different vehicle, which is why I chose to stick with the Frontier, because I didn't want to start from scratch. So again, that was kind of my thoughts today on, what I'm going to be swapping over, the interchangeability of parts between the Xterra and the Frontier. I hope that was helpful for you guys. I hope that kind of gives you some ideas as far as if you're thinking of making the swap one way or the other from a Frontier to an Xterra or not. Or even if you're making, a swap from a Jeep to a Suburban, or, there's a million different things where you kind of have to, if you're going to make a swap in vehicles, which happens pretty frequently because vehicles are not like houses, right? They're not necessarily appreciating assets. As a vehicle wears out, or as you get to a point where it doesn't make sense to keep working on a vehicle anymore and you want to upgrade or swap out, you got to start thinking about what you can move from one truck to the other. And sometimes it makes sense to stick with the same brand and stick with something similar because you can swap more stuff over, right? So again, if I had stock underpinnings in my Frontier, a lot of my parts that are pretty new on the Xterra could have swapped over to it. In this case, I just got lucky and I upgraded to something with pretty new, heavier duty components from a Titan. So again, I hope that was interesting. I hope that you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're not already, make sure to click that subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when new videos drop. I drop a couple videos a week, so tons of new content coming all the time. Down below in the description are links to that Venture to Rome video that I talked about with the Jetboil, all the products that I talked about in this video. Also Facebook, Instagram, the podcast if you're watching on YouTube, YouTube if you're on the podcast. And last but not least, I do have a Patreon page now. It's really, really cool, actually. I'm super excited about it because the goal with it is just to build up like a really unique sort of small community of overlanders that want to give each other good feedback, that want to hang out, want to talk about videos, want to give feedback on my videos and stuff. Like, again, this video came from a subscriber's recommendation. So thanks again to Matt Jenner for that recommendation. But yeah, that was it, guys. So post up in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've made a swap like this. Let me know if you are thinking of making a swap like this. Let me know if you have any questions about any of the stuff that I said in this video or about just swapping stuff over from one vehicle to another in general. But again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.